recognize the turn even if I seen it. Been driving all along, feel like I'm dreaming. Okay.
We'll find out why Billy Carson unfortunately refuses for this to come out.
Something happened. Billy Carson had a debate about Christianity with somebody who actually knows what they're talking about.
The hidden interview everyone has been waiting for between Billy Carson, aka Forbidden Knowledge, and Wesley Huff.
We're now saying that all this information that they put forward, all their verbal handwritten history, all their written history, that's got to go to the side because this one text is 1,000% accurate.
Sure, but so my question is, most of that is oral history, correct?
Oh, it's all oral history, even the Bible.
So when we're engaging with oral history, what methodologies are you using to confirm that the orality is accurate?
Oh, man.
Billy Carson, 4 times best-selling author, founder and CEO of Forbidden Knowledge TV, with a certificate in ancient civilizations from Harvard University.
Translation that's off is they say, well, Jesus was crucified.
Whoa.
Well, that doesn't exist in the Sinai Bible. Do you actually believe that the majority of Christians really believe that God is not masculine, that God is has both aspects?
It's irrelevant what the majority of Christians believe.
What
historical biblical Christianity articulates is what they should believe.
Wesley Huff, historian, linguist, biblical scholar, and PhD.
I'm staking my entire life on the person of Jesus. And where do I find the information about Jesus? I find that in the Bible. And if I can't trust the Bible, I really have no reason to put my hope and trust in Jesus.
There's a lot of false information that's copied from ancient texts. And if you go by that text, all of a sudden you end up with 400 years of slavery. You end up with abuse. You end up with divide and conquer tactics that separate people.
So you said you explore the text. I don't deny that. But the evidence, by going off of what you have put forward in terms of the actual documentary evidence, is not just less than convincing. I mean this with respect, because I think you have done a lot of research. You've traveled to these places. I have too. Like, this is what I do as my career.
Let the games begin. I'm here with my good man, Bill.
Yeah, let the games begin. That's what the host said. And that's exactly what's been going on ever since the debate between Wes Huff and Billy Carson happened. It's been nothing but games, pulling down the video off the internet after 6 hours, a bunch of stuff that hasn't been made public yet that people are doing in order to suppress this video's publication and distribution. But tonight here on Street Apologist Live with your host, Vocab Malone, we are going to look at some clips and see the footage for ourselves and interact with it. This is covered under fair use because we are adding our thoughts and commentary, and we are not just playing someone's raw file. That would definitely generate a copyright problem. We're not doing that. So if anyone tries to bring copyright problems, we will do our best to fight them, and no amount of intimidation is going to make us take it down. Now, YouTube may take it down, so you might want to screen record this, and you might want to download it as soon as it's off, because no guarantee it'll stay on the internet after it happens. But a debate happened. It's unseen by the masses, but we did a live stream exposing this recently, and guess what happened? In that interview with Wes Huff, I asked you, audience, the squad, I said, hey, if you guys find this, send it to me. A bunch of you sent me some great links, and now we have got it. So we're gonna talk about it right here. Are you guys ready? If you're ready, give me a thumbs up. Give me a 1. Give me something. Let's light the matches and bring the fire and the air horn. We got it all. Who's Billy Carson? He is someone who makes a bunch of claims and a bunch of money, and it's based upon his credibility as someone who is an expert in a variety of fields, and that's why he doesn't want this video to come out, because it's exposed him, and his credibility is on the line. I see the ones, I see the thumbs. Let's go.
Games begin. I'm here with my good man, Billy Carson.
All right. This is the first part where he talks about the Sinai
If
Bible.
you want to, I guess, go first, Billy, as to how you came about, like the findings where it seems that Jesus was not crucified, or that's not accurate?
Sure. And in my videos, and if you listen to the podcast, the statement is according to the Sinai Bible, and the text there actually is about 12 to 14,000 differences between the Sinai Bible and the King James Version of the Bible, which came much later. And then also one of the things that were interesting is that they discovered the book of Jesus is, according to some scholars, it's a little controversial, but they claim that this is an accurate record that Jesus may have even been married, which then, adds more, if that's true, it adds more to the hypothesis that maybe he wasn't crucified. I just personally believe that Jesus was an amazing human being. I don't think that he was the Son of God in the sense that he's God, but that we're all gods. As he said, ye are gods.
Let's just stop right there. So in the beginning, hypothetically, he's making factual claims. What I mean is these are things that can be verified strictly by looking at something, if it's really there to look at. Then he transitioned into his own personal theology. So it's interesting. The reason I bring that up is because this is a perfect juxtaposition to see why he promotes what he promotes. And this shows you really who he is. The claims he makes that undermine the Bible's authority and veracity, the truthfulness of the text and the records therein. He makes them in order to undermine the Bible's theology. Understand? So notice what we had there. First of all, he makes reference to the Sinai Bible. There is no such thing called the Sinai Bible. There is something called Codex Sinaiticus. Anyone with even a passing knowledge of textual criticism and the history therein knows about that, and the count who discovered it, and things like that, von Tischendorf, and how he got it from the monks there. And it's a fascinating story there, Codex Sinaiticus, named after the monastery in which they found it. So when we take a look at this, we say, okay, he's saying it's older than the King James Bible. That's kind of funny because you think about the King James Bible and you realize, oh, okay, the King James Bible, that's just a translation. That's what that is. All right, I got a couple people saying I'm cutting out. What I may have to do is let me try something here. If I speak when the video's not up, then can you guys hear me fine? Please let me know, because if so, then I'll just have to switch back and forth. So this is one of the very first things that happened in the debate between Billy Carson and someone who actually is a scholar, who we have, a man named Wes Huff, who we interviewed recently here on Street Apologist Live. Drop that link in the chat. And in this right away, he starts talking about something he's talked about a lot, which is, according to him, and basically one of the oldest Bibles, he's saying, the Sinai Bible, which that's not the name, it's Codex Sinaiticus. In that, Jesus was not crucified. That's his claim. Understand? That's what he's saying. Well, is that really true? Is that really accurate? Here, I got a couple people saying they can't hear me, but let me see here, because sometimes this happens where some of the audience can't, some of the audience can. And the thing is, I'll mess around with a little bit. What I've noticed a lot of times is on playback, I can be heard fine. Yeah. There is something we want to do. I'm fine. I'm fine on here. So you guys just have to refresh, and I'm just gonna keep on going because there's no problem on my end. So I know on playback it's gonna be fine. So I'm not worried about it, and we're gonna keep on going. So we've already seen some of the claims that he makes, and then notice how he transitioned. What did he transition into? He transitioned into, hey, well, I think Jesus was an amazing man. He was a fine man, but he wasn't God unless you mean it in the sense that we're all gods, like Psalm 82. Common proof text that people want to make humans God. It's interesting there the Bible speaks authoritatively, but when it speaks about other things, it's not authoritative. But when it supposedly is telling people they're God, then all of a sudden it's authoritative and accurate, But let's find out what else he says and the response. This is in the debate. We're going to play the clips, and we're going to react. I'd love to hear the audience's reaction as well. All right.
And I just personally believe that the return of the Christ is the return of the Christ consciousness. When we can all achieve a certain level of knowledge, wisdom, passion, understanding, empathy, love that he came to this planet with, and we get that in our mind and our conscience, and we can act on those incredible emotions and that understanding, that the whole world is going to transform instantaneously.
The return of the Christ consciousness. This is classic New Age gobbledygook. You know, taking some of the concepts of the Bible, but then permutating them to the point where they're unrecognizable. You know, Mr. Carson, what's your reason for saying that there's going to be a return of Christ consciousness, and that just means a higher elevated thought? You know, Christ, the word literally means Messiah. Christos in Greek. It's from the Hebrew Mashiach, because Christos is anointed one. So here you have the Messiah consciousness. Well, this is not a void concept, Messiah or Christ. It's not a blank slate for us just to write whatever we want to write upon it. Indeed, it's filled out in the foreshadowing and prophetic writing of the Old Testament. And that's why the Jewish people were waiting upon the Mashiach. In fact, many people who embrace Judaism to this day still say, we want Mashiach now. But the Christian message is that he has come, fulfilling prophecy. And then we see further the concept fleshed out literally in the incarnation about who the Messiah is. But people just use these terms from Scripture, basically hijacking them, and I would even say prostituting them for their own message or gain to turn it into what they want it to be. Notice he said, I personally believe. So we're not just hearing the bad theology, but we're hearing the claims of the bad theology is backed up by bad evidence, meaning it's not really good evidence. Now, Wes is going to respond, and you're going to see what I'm talking about, but I just want you to analyze what he said so far, and it's all predicated upon the idea, even though these things actually are not really connected very well, that the Sinai Bible supposedly does not contain the crucifixion of Jesus. Remember, that's the crux of it. Thereby, he is deconstructing the whole Christian message. And notice he says Jesus also, according to ancient evidence, was married. Further evidence, he says, that Jesus was never crucified. Let's find out.
And I think at the second coming is the coming of the Christ consciousness to the planet, not a human being flying back to Earth to save people. That's just my personal understanding of how I've perceived it over many, many years of going through this information and going through all this text.
Okay.
When you say the Sinai Bible, what are you referring to specifically?
It's the biblical text that was written. It made it into you can actually look it up on Amazon. It's a Bible called, I have a version at home. It's called the Sinai Bible, right, from Mount Sinai. I'm assuming that's the mountain that they're referencing there. But they put together...
He's assuming it's the mountain. Yeah, I mean... Any basic textual criticism book often has the story about the Count who went and kind of snuck out pages of Sinaiticus from the monks there, who apparently were using it. The story goes, they didn't understand what they had. It was to be for like firewood, basically, to kindle their fire. They did not understand the antiquity of it. And so it's from a monastery that was there in that Sinai region. So yes, that is what it's from.
Own version of the biblical text prior to the King James Version being put out.
Sure. So when you refer to the Sinai Bible, would you be referring to Codex Sinaiticus? Like the codex that comes... Okay. That's why I was trying to get some clarification.
So Wes... Since Billy is not using the proper terminology, so no one actually knows what he's saying, Wes had to clarify first, like, do you mean Sinaiticus? You know, what are you saying? What are you saying here? And so he says, oh, yeah, that is what it is. Okay, so watch here.
Because, so you can actually go and see, Codex Sinaiticus is at the British Library. So you can go and see it. It's on display. And the British Library has actually digitized the entire manuscript. So I work with manuscripts in my linguistic work. I'm an expert on early Christian scribal culture, and particularly in Greek and Coptic manuscripts. I actually have a facsimile. So I have a photocopy that was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work.
Now, I know your eyes are probably watching on Wes's side of the screen because Wes is pulling out a facsimile of Sinaiticus, so obviously it's fascinating. But I'm going to rewind it just a little bit. I want you to watch Billy's side of the screen. Watch carefully his face. At first, as if, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I agree. But I think you're seeing the haze come over. The sheepishness is setting in once he realizes, oh, I'm used to playing in the minor leagues. This is the major leagues. I'm out of my depth. I've never seen a 106-mile-per-hour fastball before. Shout out to Yandel, a.k.a. Alan Torres, for the super chat. Thank you very much, my brother, for holding it down for this ministry, continuing to support what we do. And we may need it because we might get in trouble for this video. So watch carefully, Billy. Here.
Manuscripts. I actually have a facsimile. So I have a photocopy that was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work with in my office. So I have it here. And the only reason I asked for clarification is because I want to make sure that what I'm addressing is actually what you mean.
Gotcha.
And not addressing something else. Because the Codex Sinaiticus in particular is just a it's a 4th century Greek manuscript. It comes from approximately between 325 and 350 AD. And its text of the Gospels reads almost identical to the modern Greek text that we develop translations from.
He's exactly right. And I want to point out to you that Wes just doesn't have the facsimile, which is in Greek, you know. You can access this online and you can physically go see it. These things aren't hidden, and he's making claims about it. It's shocking no one has called him out on this. I don't think he's ever going to get in a ring with anyone who knows what they're talking about ever again because of this.
So my curiosity is just simply in kind of exploring when you say that it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there. I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of, say, Matthew 27, where it has Jesus being crucified. And that's in Codex Sinaiticus. Or,
Real quick. Why is Billy saying, yeah, as if he agrees and knows what he's talking about? He just made the claim the crucifixion was not in pretty much the oldest Bible, complete Bible. Notice how he grabs his phone. I think he realizes this is time to use Google. Watch carefully. Right when he grabs his phone, what do you think his search
Matthew
is?
27, where it has Jesus being crucified.
Right. There you go.
And that's in Codex Sinaiticus, or the John 19, or any of the other ones. So I think my confusion is that it doesn't read any differently. So actually, are you able to pull up a website with the viewers or listeners or whatever
I'm
be able
looking
to see
for it
that?
right now to make sure I have the right the version that I'm looking at.
Wait. Did you hear what he just said? I'm pulling up right now to make sure I have the right version that I'm looking at. Basically, he's saying, let me make sure here. He's been going around saying this thing to people, getting the shocks and the awes. And people are like, whoa. And now he's going to check in. Wait, what?
I'm just curious, the Sinai Bible, where was that piece
I found
discovered?
the text where I was referencing, actually. I was misquoted. I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
First of all, those two things don't sound alike. Those two things are radically different documents. He just said, I found the text I was referencing. It's the Gospel of Barnabas. At first he said, I was misquoted. I mean, I misspoke there. Do you guys understand what just happened? Watch this again. Watch this again. Crazy.
I'm just curious, the Sinai Bible, where was that piece discovered?
I found the text where I was referencing, actually. I was misquoted. I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
Okay, yeah. Well, so
audience, what do we think? Understand the magnitude of this. He's been going around telling people basically the oldest Bible doesn't contain the crucifixion of Jesus. And now when he's called on it, he's saying, oh, actually, it was the Gospel of Barnabas. I bet he literally searched for ancient gospel that doesn't have the crucifixion. Why are you telling people this then, Billy?
that's good. So let's deal with that too, because I've actually worked with, there are 2 manuscripts of the Gospel of Barnabas. The Gospel of Barnabas is a really interesting document because it is a known forgery. And so that's why I think it's important to get to these sources. So at the very start of the Gospel of Barnabas, which we only have 2 copies of, one is in Italian and one is in Spanish.
Okay, I just want everyone to understand this. First of all, what Wes is saying is exactly true. These aren't debatable things. And these are facts you actually could look up. It's not a bluff. You could look them up and see what he's talking about. Notice that the 2 languages of the Gospel of Barnabas, they're European languages. And none of them are Greek. It's not Hebrew. You see what I'm saying? Because this is a medieval forgery, Gospel of Barnabas. Probably done by Muslims or people sympathetic to them. And it does not contain the crucifixion of Jesus because the Quran teaches Jesus wasn't crucified, supposedly in Surah 4. And so they made a document to prove it, apparently.
We see right off the bat that the Gospel of Barnabas, not to be confused with either the Epistle of Barnabas or the Acts of Barnabas, which are 2 apocryphal documents from the 2nd century, but the Gospel of Barnabas in particular, we know it's a forgery because it does things like in chapter 92, it says that Jesus spent 40 days on Mount Sinai, and then he came to the Jordan River and he walked to Jerusalem. But Mount Sinai is more than a week's journey away from Jerusalem, and neither Mount Sinai nor Jerusalem are close to the Jordan River. So,
meaning whoever wrote the Gospel of Barnabas in the medieval era didn't know the layout or geography of Israel and its environs, but they had read the Gospels, and so must have thought this stuff was just together. So he's telling him these are some of the reasons why it's known the Gospel of Barnabas is a forgery. Now remember, it's not the Epistle of Barnabas and it's not the Acts of Barnabas, both of which are pseudepigrapha, but they're earlier. He specifically said Gospel of Barnabas. This is not Sinaiticus, though, people.
Never mind there not being a route from the Jordan River to like around Mount Sinai or going to Jerusalem. But there are internal problems with the Gospel of Barnabas, which indicate that it shows no actual indication of evidence of coming from or even having knowledge of first century Jewish understanding. It actually says Jesus is the Christ, but not the Messiah.
Did you hear that? Gospel of Barnabas. It says Jesus is the Christ, but not the Messiah. You understand why that's a problem? Audience, why is that a problem? Because Messiah means Christ. This is how, ignorant the person or persons who wrote Gospel of Barnabas are. And yet he's referring to this instead of Sinaiticus.
Which indicates that whoever the author is, he didn't know that those were the same words. And I think a bigger problem is that the Gospel of Barnabas actually paraphrases Dante's Inferno, which was written in 1314. So there's a lot of internal evidences that disqualify the Gospel of Barnabas, never mind the fact that we don't have any evidence of it prior to the 14th century, and none in any other language other than Middle Age Italian Italian and Spanish.
I want you guys out there to think, because notice he made this claim in the debate as a correction for it not being Sinaiticus he was referencing. So think in your head, once he hears this information, what would he say to that? What would he say? What's he going to say? Oh, well, you know what? I guess Jesus was crucified then. What's he going to say? What do you think he's going to say? What can he say? I want you guys to anticipate whatever his answer is going to be. He's going to give sort of an answer, a response, but it's fascinating. So watch this. Someone in the live chat said, is this real? This is real. This debate took place on Mark Menard's channel, but it's since been taken down because Billy's been trying to scrub it off the internet, but we're not going to let that happen.
but the internal content of the Gospel of Barnabas disqualifies it from being ancient. And then the fact that it's doing things like paraphrasing Dante, or it also refers to a rule of the time of Jubilee, which was changed in the Middle Ages from what it was in the biblical year of Jubilee. And it goes with the Middle Ages concept, not the ancient concept.
So this next part's funny. So guys, you really got to track with me tonight. I know it's late, but it's a weekend. You guys should be in church tomorrow. If this is too late, watch it tomorrow so you still get your sleep and you're up in church at a good church tomorrow. This part's basically a flex, man. This part's a flex because Wes is going to show how he literally copies papyri and makes his own version of them. I didn't even know there was people that do this exact type of thing. This is a whole other level of Bible geekdom right here. I had heard some things, okay, but I'd never really seen the finished product in this way, the way he describes. You'll see, basically, this is just a giant ancient papyri flex. Watch this. You guys are going to love this. This is wild.
So if there is something that denies the crucifixion, I want to make sure that I'm analyzing it and that the methodology by which I analyze it actually reveals that the content can be accurately tied to the event. So if we're talking about, say, Codex Sinaiticus, that's in the 4th century. Now that is, I would agree with you, Billy, our oldest copy of the Bible in the sense of cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation copy of the Bible.
He's like, one of my facts was right. Wes agreed with one thing I said about something. But notice he's going to follow it by something because, yes, that's the oldest complete copy of the Bible, or essentially complete. But then what he's going to do is say, well, there's also scraps, basically fragments prior to that. And people were saying this is the full debate. No, I cannot play the full debate. This is not my content. I can play clips, though, and interact, making my own new content. And that's covered under fair use. So I think copyright claims would fail on that. But if I played the full debate just in itself, then yeah, I would have a problem. But that's not what we're doing here today.
Right.
The problem is that we have individual copies of all 4 Gospels going back hundreds of years before Codex Sinaiticus.
He's right.
So I have a facsimile behind me of P66. This is a late 2nd century copy of the Gospel of John.
Wes just doesn't have Sinaiticus on his shelf. He has 66 on his shelf. Obviously, there's their facsimiles. This is not normal stuff. This is beyond the level of just like apologetics. This is someone who actually understands New Testament textual criticism at a deeper level. Because not only, it's one thing to read printed Greek, especially in modern fonts. It's another thing to read ancient handwritten Greek that's not done by professionals, that a lot of times all the words are jumbled together. And a lot of times it'll be like in all capitals or all lower. This is a whole nother level of your skill. Where if someone says, oh, I know Greek, they're usually talking about modern printed Greek or digital, and they can see it. And this is beyond that, because he's talking about facsimiles of ancient documents that in the early stages of Christianity were not done by professionals. They're difficult to read unless you really can do it.
I work with this particular manuscript. I can just show the screen right here. This is an almost complete copy of the Gospel of John.
I have that papyrus at home.
Oh, really? What do you mean? I have that papyrus at home. Now, I think he's just trying to be like, me too. My dad can beat your dad. Because if Billy has that papyrus at home, then why would he say that the oldest copies of the Bible don't have the crucifixion of Jesus? Notice how he slides it in there. This dude really says, I have that papyrus at home. Now, I could say I have the papyrus at home because I have a book by Philip Comfort that has printed versions of the earliest texts and in some cases pictures, or I know the website to go for Dan Wallace's work for the center there. I could say I have that manuscript at home, but I don't have anything like this, and I don't think Billy does either. Now, you can get this stuff, but it's kind of expensive. This is not cheap stuff to get. Specialists and experts get this stuff.
I have that papyrus at home.
Really?
Yeah.
So I'll show you this. So I make...
Notice that. I don't know if you guys caught that, because Mark said a little something. A copy. Because he says, I have that papyrus at home, and then he says, a copy. Well, everyone... This is...
That papyrus at home.
Oh, that's...
So I'll show you this. So I make... So the documents you actually see on my bookshelf behind me are facsimile papyri that I've made. So when I was in Egypt last summer, I went and I got made for me some papyrus sheets.
Who does this? Mark Menard just didn't get a regular Christian apologist like me and my buddies, you know. He got someone who goes to Egypt and has the Egyptians make modern day papyri for him and then writes on them. He got the best person for us and the truth, but the worst person for Billy. It is not normal behavior, people, to have papyri sheets on hand. Now, I love it. I love it, right? I'm just telling you, this is what expertise looks like as opposed to an amateur who's fronting. This is so perfect because this exposes when people go around, I'm a scholar. Wait until you meet a real scholar who's ready to interact with you. It's over. You're just seeing it in full display. Never forget this video in your life. Look at that right there. Wes is holding up blank papyri that he makes manuscripts out of by copying and imitating what's in front of him and using X-Acto knives and stuff. And then Billy over there, a social media star. Never forget this moment.
And so I take these papyrus sheets, which are made from the papyrus plant, and then when I go and I look at actual manuscripts, so I was at the University of Philadelphia last summer, and I went and I saw a document called P1, which is a 3rd century fragment of the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. And so what I did is I sat down with that original and I produced a facsimile. So
do you guys understand what you're watching? And this shows you Christians ain't joking. We have reasons for what we believe and we get into it, bro. He's making his own version of P1 there. Look up P1 and look how similar it is to what he has. This is a level of skill and artistry and technical know-how that Billy couldn't even dream of having. I wouldn't dream of. I wouldn't claim to do this. So that's the difference. I'm not going to claim like I can.
I copied the text. First of all, I cut it out with an X-Acto knife. In not the original 3rd century one on my papyrus. I cut out with an X-Acto knife this guy, and then I copied the text transcriptionally on the front and the back. So papyrus is just simply, it's what it's made out of.
Yeah.
So they take these reeds, these papyri reeds, and they smash them down and they crisscross them, and that's how they made the paper. Shout out to Bahu Allahu Akbar. Thank you very much. And is not the thumbnail that you watched in this video. Why is that? Because it still represents what we're doing today. And guess what? I'm going to do a part 2 of the show, and that's the thumbnail I'm going to use. So get used to it, baby.
With what you said, Billy, is that we have single copies of the Gospels that can be dated to the 2nd century that all do have the crucifixion. And so if we're relying on something like the Gospel of Barnabas, which is not just like, it's not that there's debate about it, it's that it's a known forgery. I mean, no one's referring to the Gospel of Barnabas as anything other than.
If you say it's a known forgery, an expert, I'm going to go with that. Let's talk about the Old Testament a little bit.
What? A few things. Number one, in the live chat, Reno says University of Philadelphia. Yeah, there Wes misspoke. Remember, he's Canadian, so he don't know our strange ways. He's talking about the University of Pennsylvania because that's where P1 is housed. So Wes is. He's quite the Bible geek and scholar and expert, but he's still not perfect. It's not the University of Philadelphia; it's the University of Pennsylvania. So that's what but that's where P1 is. So he's still talking about what's what. Now notice how quickly if you watch an NBA game right now, you will not see a quicker pivot on that floor. You will not witness a quicker pivot on the hardwood. You will not witness a quicker pivot on the hardwood than you're going to see Billy make right now. He goes, well, if it's a known forgery, I guess I'll go with that. But what about the Old Testament? Watch this closely. Watch what happens here. After all this, all he can say, because I said, what would be his response? Well, if that's true, I'll just go with that then. But what about the Old Testament? Oh, man. NBA point guards are salivating at how quickly he pivoted. They're jealous.
Is not just like, it's not that there's debate about it. It's that it's a known forgery. I mean, no one's referring to the Gospel of Barnabas as anything other than...
If you say it's a known forgery, an expert, I'm going to go with that. Let's talk about the Old Testament a little bit leading up into the New Testament.
Well, hold on, because...
If you say it's a known forgery, I'm going to go with that. Bruh, why didn't you research this before? And Wes says, wait. Well, hold on a minute. Rightfully so. I just want to play that one more time. Then I'll watch the rest of this clip. It's going to...
Not that there's debate about it. It's that it's a known forgery. I mean, no one's referring to the Gospel of Barnabas as anything other than...
If you say it's a known forgery, an expert, I'm going to go with that. Let's talk about the Old Testament a little bit leading up into the New Testament.
Well, hold on, because...
Oh, hold on. So he addresses Gospel of Jesus' wife next.
Do you mind if I address the Gospel of Jesus' wife?
Sure, go ahead.
What was her name? Yeah, I'm like trying to write notes like I know what I'm doing, but I'm just curious.
So the Gospel of Jesus' wife doesn't actually mention. So oftentimes what happens is that the text of the Gospel of Jesus' wife is kind of paralleled with the Gospel of Philip, which mentions that that Jesus would kiss Mary Magdalene on the mouth.
Well, technically, it doesn't say on the mouth. It says on her blank. If you actually read the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, now the reason he probably said that is because a lot of people fill that in as what it probably says there. That's true. You'll see that. But technically, unless I'm missing something, Gospel of Mary Magdalene, another forgery, but it's earlier than the Gospel of Barnabas. It has a lacuna. Lacuna means a hole in the text. A lot of times when you're reading modern printings of these ancient documents, you'll see a ... with a bracket. Okay, so yeah, see, Lewis knows, Truth Defender. Actually, it doesn't. You're exactly right. That's what I was just explaining. That part of the MSS is missing. When you see MSS, it means manuscripts. So in this case, it would just be MS, not MSS, but he's exactly right. And so there is a parallel in that there was something going on. So watch this with this idea that Jesus had a wife. This really destroyed Karen King's career. Not literally, but it caused great credibility harm to her reputation, much like this debate will do to Billy.
And so those are kind of used in parallel to kind of for this argument that Jesus was married. So the Gospel of Jesus' wife is in the Harvard Library. However, the reason we know it's also not legitimate is because even though the manuscript, the papyrus that it's on, was carbon dated to the 4th century, the text was actually copied from a PDF version of the Gospel of Thomas known as Grandin's Interlinear.
What he's saying is true. So it's good forgeries will go out of their way to do things like this. Or I guess I'll say clever forgeries. Meaning they'll somehow have a papyri that actually is really old, but then the text on top of it will not be. What was discovered with the Gospel of Jesus' wife is it seems like Karen King wanted it to be true. She's there at Harvard. She's the big heavy hitter along with Elaine Pagels on the Gnostic Gospel stuff, at least has been for a couple decades now. So what you have here is you're going to have this idea that, and really it's just a fragment. You hear Gospel of Jesus' wife, it's just a fragment, right? The problem is the text was copied from a PDF file because it imitates the PDF file error.
And there was a mistake in the Coptic text of Grandin's Interlinear that was copied into the Gospel of Jesus' wife. So we know that this is not a legitimate document, even though the papyrus is ancient, and this happens a lot with forgeries. I have a couple of friends who have actually worked on projects that have revealed forgeries within Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts and within other ancient Christian papyri. But the reason why we know the Gospel of Jesus' wife and that Karen King, who kind of vouched for it and she lost a lot of credibility, unfortunately, for her, and she's admitted that it's a fake as well, was because we can tie it directly to not copying from an ancient text, but actually copying from an online version of the Gospel of Thomas in a PDF form. And the mistake on that PDF form was copied into the text that was borrowed in the phraseology apology to Jesus' wife.
Now, he's exactly right, and I thought he did a fantastic job of explaining something rather complicated. Here's the thing. You, the lay person, if you just go on DuckDuckGo and you put in Gospel of Jesus' wife, you will instantly find news articles and things along those lines indicating that it's a forgery. Immediately. You can't really look at it without finding that information because it was a big deal when it came out. They made a big deal about it. And it's like once you wait a little bit, the truth comes out. This happened somewhat recently. When I say somewhat recently, I mean it wasn't, in the 70s or something like that. This is in the past couple decades or so. I think maybe in the past 10 years. I forget the exact date. And it's like, yo, didn't you know that? Shout out to Alton Johnson. He's exactly right. Get the likes up. Everybody hit that like button and subscribe to Alton Johnson's channel. He does great work. And also I want to give a shout out to D New, who has really helped a lot with this. And D New, you're going to be on part 2 is what we're working on with this. All right. And she knows a lot about this. She probably knows more about Billy Carson than I do.
So I just point that out is, once again, with our sourcing, I think we need to make sure that we're going towards not just early sources, but actually credible sources. And unfortunately, neither the Gospel of Barnabas nor the Gospel of Jesus' wife are credible sources in terms of actually, and agreed upon by not just the vast majority of scholarship, but I don't know anybody in the field of papyrology, paleography, historiography, who actually refers to these documents as being legitimate.
That's fair enough. I can respect that.
What? I don't think you guys understand. He has been on podcast after podcast. And when I say podcast, I don't mean like the small ones I appear on. Me and my buddies. We go on our homies podcast, right? I mean, it's great. Every now and then I'm on Ruslan, or something like that. Praise God, right? In fact, that's where this whole thing started. Shout out to Ruslan. So when you look at this, you're like, okay, what's going on here? Okay. This dude's going on the biggest podcast on the planet in some cases, making these claims about Jesus not getting crucified and Jesus having a wife. And then a dude just totally rips off all the sheepskin of the argument. And then all he says is, that's fair enough. I can respect that. What? You've been promoting this. Your response is, that's fair enough. I can respect that. What? What is that? I think I hear something. Oh, that's Billy getting cooked. That's what that is. It's Billy getting cooked. It's a sound I hear.
So let's go into the Old Testament a little bit. Predominantly, from my research, I discovered that a lot of information from the Enuma, Elish, and the 7 tablets of creation.
Stop right there. Notice he says, from my research. At this point in the discussion, and we're not really that far in, would anyone in the audience really respect Billy's research?
Is a lot of in Genesis, a lot of the creation story that comes into Genesis. Not all of it, but because obviously Genesis is a much smaller version of a much bigger story. But it's literally almost word for word from the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation.
Notice, ears, people, ears. He said it's almost word for word. The Genesis creation story is almost word for word as the Enuma Elish. He says. Almost word for word. That's a strong statement. Yeah, let's find out.
The Epic of Atrahasis as well is also there in the Old Testament. Several other tablets as well, Code upon Hammurabi and a few others have made it into that text. Sumerian cylinder scrolls that talk about the creation story. Again, the creation story in the Epic of Atrahasis. And so we tend to see this copying of ancient tablets, text, and scriptures, even some papyruses.
Plural of it, and I understand. My pronunciation's not great. I'd be forgetting stuff all the time. Just so you guys know, the plural of papyrus is papyri. I'm just saying.
to the biblical text, meaning that my point here is that I think a lot of people are saying that this information was written in real time. A lot of people believe that. If you ask the average person, they really believe that. But
the average person believes Genesis. I wish that was the case, Billy. But I don't think maybe he means the average Christian. I wish that was the case too. You know. Now, just so everyone knows, the thing about Jesus not being crucified and the thing about Jesus with the wife, that is fringe stuff. It takes a lot to get over there. You're talking Dan Brown, Michael Bajan, Da Vinci Code land, and that kind of stuff. This other stuff he's saying, actually, you'll find more scholars who would agree with him. And I think that's why he wanted to switch so quick. Now, I'm not saying it's right, because there's a little bit of truth to what he's saying, and I think Wes is probably going to get into that. And so it's important just to understand what he's saying now, even though he's misrepresenting it, especially where he said it's basically word for word copied. It's not as far off as what he said before. Shout out to Mr. Phil Fox, one of the most generous people, one of the most generous donors consistently to this channel. And thank you very much. And yeah, I did give you a shout out because much love, man. Much love, bro.
a lot of this information is just copied from older tablets and texts from an earlier date. That's what I have found, that it's made it into the canonized Bible, but they never reference that they got it from any other ancient texts and tablets that have to do with a totally different civilization with totally different religious beliefs.
Have you read the Enuma Elish?
Yeah.
This is wild. Now, this part of the discussion is a little bit longer. Enuma Elish, you could look it up and find summaries online. Make sure you're looking at a credible summary, by the way. He's going to give part of his understanding of part of it, and he gets some of it right. I'm not acting like I'm an expert on the Enuma Elish here, okay, people? But he infuses into his summary bizarre ancient alien stuff. This is just this is going to go for a while. We are going to be going out into no man's land right here. Are you ready? Ooh. Do I have any like UFO sounds or like do I have any maybe I got a ghost sound. I'm going to play the ghost sound. Here we go.
I've done lectures.
Sure. Do you mind summarizing the content of the creation account in the Enuma Elish for us?
Sure. The Enuma Elish is a very ancient text discovered in the library of Ashurbanipal, which is crazy, an astronomical account of the creation of our solar system. It talks about planets and moons gaining specific orbits around the sun. It talks about a huge planet named Tiamat, 46 times larger than Earth. Earth didn't exist at the time that this, according to the author of this text, which is pretty interesting. And then there talks about a nemesis of sorts. In the original version, it's called Nibiru, but in a more recent version, still thousands of years old, the name was changed to Marduk. Marduk is in the Jewish American Library, in the biblical text, in the Torah, and so forth. Very popular figure in ancient times in the religious books and text. Marduk wanted to be the destroyer, so Marduk is the one that during its next orbit towards Tiamat, crashed into Tiamat and destroyed Tiamat. A huge chunk of it swung away, recoalesced, taking the water, land, and organic material, which basically recoalesced as our planet here, Earth. And the rest of it broke up into pieces. Some of it turned into the asteroid belt. Other parts of it were thrown towards the sun, and some were thrown towards the inner Oort cloud, towards the outer edge of the solar system.
Stop for a second. Shout out to my man. I know who you are. Lugal Kien Yi Ki Uru. I bet you've looked into this. He's talking about Sumerian grammar because you're an expert on the Nuwabians. And doesn't he sound like a Nuwabian? In fact, do you know for sure that he used to be a follower of Dr. Malachi Z. York? Because he seems like an updated version. But it's funny, just like he's accusing Genesis of not citing its source as the Enuma Elish, this man ain't cited York, at least that I know. I'd love to see some of your articles. Drop a link, bro.
This planet or this moonlet that orbited supposedly a brown dwarf, based on the description of it, gained a very strange orbit around our sun. And we have the scientific evidence now also to match with NASA's data, where we see that Saturn and I believe Neptune switch places.
What in the ancient alien hypothesis is going on here?
Uranus is flipped on its side, and that's more evidence that something came through our solar system in ancient times and gravitationally really tugged at planets here and switched up their orbits and even pulled the axis of a planet on its own side, where the equator is now running north and south.
Now, it's true about Uranus being odd like that, but you know what? It's evidence of the Creator's ability to diversify in his creation. He says, hey, I'm going to show you what else I can do. God shows off his handiwork. It's beautiful.
So a little bit of modern astrophysics kind of backs up what this ancient text is saying. But the Enuma also then begins to talk about the fact that these beings, it kind of cuts into the fact that these beings, are on Earth and at some point begin to engage mankind. In other words, they didn't create people from scratch, but they engaged the existing hominid and began to utilize us as workers for their workforce.
This sounds just like York. This sounds just like Nubian stuff.
In the Atrahasis epic, you see a much similar story. Slightly later date period, but still thousands of years old. The epic.
Wes is like, I don't think we're going to be talking about this papyrus anymore, so let me just go ahead and put that back.
Atrahasis, and we see a very similar story, and we see where the sons of God literally came down to Earth. They came from Mars, according to this text, if you read the translation of the planet Mars and to English. And then they went to battle. They were going to go to battle in South Africa against Enki and Lil and Anu. and they come to terms without going to battle. They argued that they needed women, human women, believe it or not. And they also wanted a workforce. They didn't want to continue to do the labor. They were cleaning out the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, digging canals, building cities on Earth, and according to the text on Mars, not according to me. And a decision was made by Enki and Anu and Enlil to allow this experiment to happen, where they would take the existing hominid here. They would slay one of the gods, meaning that they would somehow, some type of genetic modification or manipulation, in my personal opinion. That's my personal hypothesis. But in the end, it ends up being that human beings are now doing a lot of this labor and worshiping these people as gods, as they, my personal opinion, masqueraded as gods. A lot of stories there, parallel stories that you see in the Bible, even the Tower of Babel incident and many other crazy stories that are in the Bible. You can find a lot of those true stories in the ancient text, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, where you can find the true story of Noah. They found the Noah tablet to give him instructions on how to build the ark. It wasn't a big boat. It was a round disc that he built with sections cut up on the inside like a pie. That was discovered about 4 or 5 years ago. I believe it's at the British Museum now. So there's a lot of text that's just been covered and copied over into the people are just became a cargo cult, worshiping people that were masquerading as gods. I do believe in God, by the way. Let me make this clear. I believe in.
What do you guys think of this? Now, the funny thing is, this is not the part that Billy's like embarrassed of, because he goes around teaching this stuff all the time. And in fact, he retreated into this territory because he thought this was his strong suit, because he obviously had been handed something, if you know what I mean. And so now he's switching over to this, And as Enslaved by Truth sarcastically says, this sounds just like Genesis. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wes, save us. We're losing here.
I believe I believe in it. There's a creator of the universe. I believe that the fact that we're here. I believe this universe is imbued with a divine energy and a divine spark that lives inside of all of us. I just don't believe that the God of the Bible is truly the creator of the universe. I don't think that God needs money. I don't think that God needs
Sure. Do you mind if I just jump in here for a second? Because I think we've kind of gone on from the original question. I appreciate that. I do have a few issues with your summary. Alden version, my Acadian's not great, but I sat down with a seriologist friend and we walked through it.
So this is what real experts do, by the way. Real experts who are usually not autodidactic, to be honest, not all the time, but since they've gained expertise in certain areas, they understand what expertise means. And so they often have friends who are experts in other areas. And they're willing to recognize their own weakness. A true expert, because of their training, often has been imbued with a proper sense of humility. It's hard to go through around all these smart people and remain arrogant. And so, you know, what he's going to say, well, I went through this because, you know, I had to, because he doesn't claim to be an Akkadian expert. You know, not everyone knows everything. And so he actually looked at the Enuma Elish in Akkadian with some of his buddies. Understand?
A couple of years ago. So I think that there are components of what you said that I would say are in there. I'm not sure it's the best summary. Nonetheless, okay, going with what you said that there were like verbatim parallels with the biblical creation story. Even just going off of what you said, which I think there are components of that I would agree with, you know, the battle of the gods, you know, the concept of Enki and the younger gods, and they fight Tiamat, and then Marduk, who swears he'll defeat Tiamat, and Kwenku, who kills Tiamat by shooting her with an arrow, and there's this big battle, and then the gods that die end up being the earth and the sky and even us, because we are the end result of that battle. I'm just curious, when you say that there are not just parallels, but there's actual copying, looking at Genesis chapter 1 and 2, where the creation story is summarized in the Bible, what are the actual kind of parallels there that you're looking to? Because as someone who's read both, I not only do I not find parallels, I actually, and this is the majority of ancient Near Eastern scholarship with me, think that Genesis chapter 1 is actually an apologetic against documents like the Enuma Elish. So what are the parallels there?
Separated the waters from the waters, for example. That's in the Enuma Elish, and that's also in the biblical text.
Okay, that I would agree is a parallel.
I laughed so hard from that, I just felt myself get faint-headed. I'm not joking now, by the way. I'm not exaggerating for melodrama's sake. Wes is a pretty straight guy in the sense that he keeps a poker face. But watch the humor rises to the surface when he hears that answer. This dude just did all this description, and it was prefaced by this claim. Remember, he wanted to switch to this topic that Genesis copied word for word. And then dude says, separated the waters. I just watch carefully Wes's face. This is so funny.
I not only do I not find parallels, I actually, and this is the majority of ancient Near Eastern scholarship with me, think that Genesis chapter 1 is actually an apologetic against documents like the Enuma Elish. So what are the parallels there?
Separated the waters from the waters, for example. That's in the Enuma Elish, and that's also in the biblical text.
Okay, that I would agree is a parallel. The only reason I highlight that is that if you're making this the argument, because if you brought it up, and I mean this with all due respect, there are superficial parallels. I would agree. You know, the separation of the water, the concept of the earth being formless and void. That's also in the Enuma Elish.
Watch, Wes is actually going to give him more parallels than Billy gave. Wes knows that more parallels that are there, because in creation accounts or origin accounts, sometimes there are parallels. It kind of makes sense. So Wes is going to help him out here.
However, I think all the other details, you know, it's the details that make the difference. And if we're looking at not the superficial crossovers, but the actual themes and concepts of what it's saying, you don't have a creation within 7 days.
The Bible's not going to take the Enuma Elish and put it into the biblical text. There are certain words that they...
Wait. The Bible's not going to take Enuma Elish and put it in the biblical text. He literally said the Genesis was almost copied word for word from the Enuma Elish.
Utilize it, let me know that they copied it from that text. Like, for example, it's separating the water from the waters, the void, the earth being void.
He just got that from Wes. Wes is the one who just told him that. The formless and void. Because his initial answer was separated the waters. He's like, well, also, the thing you just said too.
That information is literally just copied over. So it tells you that somebody saw that and said, let me add it to this book right here. Or let me add it to the scripture or this papyrus, because it wasn't a book yet.
Okay. He keeps on saying papyrus. When it comes to Old Testament, in general, not written on papyrus. That's New Testament. I'm not saying never, but usually it's vellum and scrolls and things like that. Different situation. This is just sad.
At that time.
Okay, you guys want to hear some more Old Testament, since this is what Billy Carson wanted to talk about? Here's part 3 of this discussion of this element of the debate between Wes Huff and Billy Carson. And as I've been telling you, in case you're coming in, we got a lot of people coming in right now. We almost hit 300 at one point. Let's get those likes back up. Share this link. We'll get back up and leave comments in here. That helps to notify people that we're live. I know it's late, but people could come in. They'll be here. This debate has been unseen except by a small amount of the population as of now. But I did a live stream where I interviewed Wes, and a number of you sent me the debate file. Now I have it. I cannot upload it in its entirety to my channel. I cannot send you guys the file. I'm sorry. However, I have it, and we're watching the most important clips, and we're interacting and reacting. That's the way we got to do it, and pray Mark puts it back up, or that Wes gets allowed to put it back up. Lord knows that Billy ain't going to put it up, okay? So let's watch this, okay? There we go, back into this. There we go. Part 3, OT.
It was like supposedly discovered prior to... I'm just curious.
It wasn't discovered prior to the Bible, but it dates back long before the Bible was ever written.
Oh, okay.
So
Together.
Let me just say this. So the reason why I say it's actually an apologetic against that is because the purpose of the Enuma Elish, which the Babylonians read every Babylonian New Year, was to point out the fact that the deities, and there's countless deities in the Babylonian pantheon, they actually come from the created order. So they're not outside of time and space. They actually come from the created order. And when they die in this battle, right, when Tiamat is defeated, the defeated gods become the earth and the sky and the plants and even you and me.
Real quick, and stop there. So with that, he's right. And what's interesting is that there's a great book on this I want to point out called The Bible Among the Myths by John Oswalt. And he talks about the philosophical presuppositions of other A&E texts such as this. And Wes makes some of those points as well, and he's exactly right. And what it ends up giving you is a radically different anthropology, meaning what are people? Exactly right. And so the stories are different, and the end result is different as well. Sorry, Billy.
And in that sense, the theme is that you don't actually have any purpose or end result, and you're not created in the image of God. In fact, in the ancient Babylonian system, only the kings were created in the image of God. And what we see that is counter to that is that even, sure, there's superficial, divided the waters, but we find that in almost every society and culture. That's not a parallel as much as it's just a generality. I would say what we see within the biblical account is that God purposefully creates. There's only one God. He purposefully creates, and then he creates and it's good. And it continues to say it's good 7 times. And then at the end of chapter 1, just for, the thick people in the original audience, it says, and then it was very good. And then he creates humanity, not kings, but simply the humans that he creates in God's image.
The Imago Dei is a very important doctrine. And notice in Genesis, what you have is there Yahweh. He is the only one. It's not a pantheon. And he's doing this intentionally and purposeful, not to just make humans work for him because he's lazy or something like that. And it's the fountainhead or the figurehead or the federal head, the original human pair who's made in the image of God, not just the royalty. So that means everyone who comes from them is also made in the image of God, Adam and Eve and their offspring. That means all humanity. Notice the difference. Now, this should get played out in laws, and this should get played out in politics. This should get played out in how societies are structured and ethics. And that's where you get when you focus on Genesis and the ramifications versus the pagan societies of the A&E.
And they have purpose and meaning, and that instills them with this creation order. And that's not what we find in the Enuma Elish. In fact, we find the opposite in the Enuma Elish, is that the created order is not good, it's a mistake, and that you are not created in the image of God. And there's a reminder that regular people are not created in the image of God. So linguistically, I mean, Hebrew does have Semitic ties with Akkadian. It doesn't with Sumerian. Sumerian is a language isolate, a glutenizing language. But I would say, just with all due respect, the parallels linguistically are not there. There might be superficial kind of concepts that are there, but they're so superficial that we can find them in everything, in the sense of I'm in an office studio, you're in your office studio. That doesn't mean that, that we're the same people or we're even in the same place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't agree with that. I just see.
What? Yeah, but I don't agree with that. What don't you agree with? He gave all the data. And it's not just mere interpretation. He's giving the truth here. What do you mean? But I don't agree with that. Well, tell us why you don't agree with that.
If I have all these texts out, there's a lot of different information that you can see. A lot of it's been copied word for word into the biblical text.
That was his response, ladies and gentlemen. Now, what happens is Mr. Carson, real name Carlson, gets fact-checked every time he does facts. And so what he does is he's going to switch into more emotionally based issues that he knows sort of modern society may track with him, sort of the pop culture element of the audience, who is basically mainstream, accepts whatever the cultural norms are at the time, goes along, not really swimming against the grain type of person in their thought, not salmon amongst the audience, if you understand the reference there. And what you're going to see is he's going to switch, and this is where some of the transition happens. And that's where we spend a lot of the rest of the time here. You guys ready? Let's go. Let's get into this.
But what's the word
in your version of what you believe in, you keep saying that God's a he.
Yeah.
And so where do you get that from?
What are you saying? God's a he.
Throughout both the Hebrew Old Testament and the Greek New Testament, you have the masculine singular pronoun used for God.
And why is God a man? Where's the evidence of this?
Okay, saying he doesn't equal man because God is not human. Now, we understand because of the incarnation. That's another part of the discussion. But especially when we're talking about creation story, this is pre-incarnation. I just hope people understand that.
Well, God isn't a man. See, within historical Christianity, we don't believe that God has a gender. However, the way that he has decided to reveal himself is through the masculine plural, and then ultimately by becoming a human in the person of Jesus Christ. So we don't believe that God has a gender. In fact, the fact that God creates humanity in his image and he creates them male and female, those are two aspects of the image of God. And so that's the completeness. So historical Christianity has never argued that God is gendered. Jesus is gendered in the sense that during the incarnation, he becomes a human man, but he's still fully man and fully God. But God is spirit. And right, as the scripture says, we worship him in spirit and in truth. And but nobody's arguing that. What's that? Sorry?
That always blows my mind.
God is the same all the time, right? He's always good. God is all the same all the time. Right?
But we do see that in Scripture, God has revealed himself through the masculine plural. And there are aspects of God's character that we see within Scripture that do actually communicate. Jesus says that he longs to gather Israel like a mother hen collects her chicks. So we see aspects of, the feminine of God, not meaning that God is feminine, but that the image of God reflects both the masculine and the feminine. And that's why when, the two become one flesh, there's a uniting of that reflects the image of God.
Okay, he's going to get cut off here. Watch.
As well,
Do you
within
believe that the majority
covenant of marriage.
So there's where you get cut off. And guys, we're about halfway through the clips that I have. Do you guys want me to keep going with this? Or are you ready to call it a night, want to do part 2? Let me get some likes and maybe super chats if that's what you want, or I'm down to pick this up tomorrow or whatever. Let me know what you guys think. Well, thank you. There's super chat. Westhoff versus Captain Tazariak. Westhoff versus Gorilla Hebrew. Let's set something up. Wes is incredibly well studied. Well, I'll let you know how that goes. We shall see. He's finishing.
Do you actually believe that the majority of Christians really believe that God is not masculine, that God is has both aspects?
That's not exactly what Wes said. What he was saying is the complete image of God is male and female together. Made in the image of God, it's he created them. Understand? And so that's one thing that he's saying there. But I think Wes just doesn't get into the precision element of it, and he gives a great answer. But notice how he's just switching this up. Oh, do you think the majority of Christians believe? What does that have to do with his claims or anything we've been talking about so far? He's real slippery. Okay, I see you guys want me to keep on going. Let's see. Maybe I'll get some more encouragement. I will. But thank you for the super chat and Slay by Truth.
If you
it's irrelevant what the majority of Christians believe.
On the road, how many would tell you, that God's not a man? They've never been taught this.
Well, then how does Wes know, first of all? And if you do any kind of advanced Sunday school, even some adult Sunday schools are advanced like this. There's apologists, for example, or theologians who will teach, some pastor scholar types. Now, I understand that's probably in the minority, but if you go to seminary, a good Bible college, all that's right there. And it's online everywhere, so he's saying that, but okay.
Well, I was taught it growing up. I was taught it in when I was a child, when I went to seminary, when I went to Bible college. I was taught it in graduate school. I would say I would say a few things to that. I would say, in one sense, it's irrelevant what the majority of Christians believe, because what historical biblical Christianity articulates is what they should believe. There are Christians who run around saying all sorts of things that are not in conformity to biblical, historical, Orthodox Christianity.
Oh,
and they shouldn't believe that because it's irrelevant. And so if one Christian believes something that is not in line with biblical Christianity, that's on them. So God is not gendered, but he does express through inspired scripture the masculine the masculine pronoun.
Exactly right. Israel bound, I don't think you fully understand what was going on there. It's not that God has a feminine side. No. Notice he reiterated God's described in the masculine pronoun, first of all. What he's saying is that human beings, when they bear the image of God, it's together that men and women show the image of God. And also that sometimes feminine imagery, and he gave the example of the mother hen, is used of God, but it doesn't mean that he's literally that, because it's a masculine pronoun. I think I'm a complementarian, but I think you just have an aversion to that. But, work on it. You'll get there. Because that's
understand that human beings are going to take that and abuse it to put their boot on the neck of women for eons. It's pretty interesting. Also, I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, hold on. Let me speak to that.
Can I
because
say
it is
something there real quick, guys?
It's funny. A lot of these conscious community types will say that stuff about Christianity, and they turn out to be like polite. You understand what I'm saying? This happens so much with these guys. Carson just did it. I hope he's not like polite, if you know what I mean. But brah. Come on.
Have to.
Yeah, sure.
So they get more into this because this is where Billy wanted to go.
There's a really great resource written by a friend of mine, John Dixon. It's a book called Bullies and Saints, where he goes through a lot of the instances of we're obviously going to find abuses and every human being is going to find a way to exploit whatever is presented to them. So in one sense, I think we can say, isn't it convenient that God used the masculine plural pronoun, the masculine pronoun, I keep saying plural, it's just a mistake, the masculine pronoun, and we can say, oh, sure, that's convenient, maybe, but it is how he has revealed himself to us.
That's exactly right. Now, this is going to launch into Christian ethics. I'm proud to be Canadian. Hey, you and Wes Huff both. Say, what's this debate about? Well, it's a little bit bigger than that. So the debate doesn't have a topic per se. And here's the deal. They had these discussions since Mark recently was converted, adult convert to Christ. And they've been having these discussions. And obviously, Billy's stuff is like faith destroying. And so Mark was like, hey, these conversations we have privately, this is my understanding, okay? I'm trying to relay it best I understand. If I got something wrong, then I apologize. Let's have that on the podcast. But he said, let's have someone who really knows what they're talking about here. Hey, we're getting up 350. We're almost, not long, we'll have 400 viewers. So please go ahead and hit that like button, share this. And if you believe in this work, go ahead and subscribe to Patreon. And so Mark said, who should I get? He went and got Wes Huff. And then Wes came on, and this is what happened. Watch this. Great stuff.
Difference is, though, I think historically within Judeo-Christianity, you have this ethic that we were talking about before that I think is fundamentally different than what we find in things like the Enuma Elish, the Atrasis, and other things, in that we are created in the image of God. And actually, one of the earliest criticisms of Christianity are by individuals like Celsus, who is a Greco-Roman philosopher in the 2nd century, where he accused Christianity of being foolish, dishonorable, and stupid, and he called it the religion of slaves, women, and children.
He's exactly right about Celsus. And Origen responded to him later, supposedly, the book that Celsus called something like True Doctrine or something like that. It's exactly right. And that was a criticism, was that Christianity was too, and I'm using this in a different sense of the technical categories that were developed in the 20th century, but the Christianity was too egalitarian. And the idea that you would have slaves fellowshipping with the elite and women there learning as disciples was very offensive, especially to a Roman man with the idea of paterfamilia and all this. So that's exactly right. And Wes is bringing that out. So he's saying what Christian ethics actually does and has done.
Why? Not because God used the masculine pronoun for himself and people were abusing that, because the concept that Christians believed in of everybody, no matter what your gender, your race, your social standing, Paul says in Christ there is no slave nor free, there is no Jew nor Gentile, there is no Scythian or barbarian, there's no male nor female. These things united people. And we can see there's a historian named Rodney Stark.
Rodney Stark is mainly kind of a, sociologist, and does good work within the historical realm. And he has some good stuff in this. I don't even know if Rodney Stark's a Christian. D. Carpse says, did you get your copyright claim notice from Mark yet? I got mine almost the same day. Are you planning to leave it up? I probably will get one too. That's the way this is going. I knew that going in, but I'm going to do my best to not let that stop me because this is covered under fair use. We should be able to win it. And I hope that it puts mild pressure on Mark to do the right thing. I don't want him to become Billy Carson's errand boy, where like in the situation you had where Jacob Berman was threatening Sonetta to take content down on my channel, where he was trying to get Sonetta to basically do his dirty work. And fortunately, Sonetta eventually bucked against that because this is the types of things people do when they don't like the outcome of debates. Carson's doing the same thing, and I feel like, that Mark is sort of being cornered into this. But I hope that this doesn't continue because I think he knows it's wrong. Aim all love, but we're going to try to do the right thing on our end as far as bringing truth and light to falsehood.
And in his book, The Rise of Christianity, he actually says that you can track empirically the agency of women across the ancient world by the movement of Christianity. So that, in other words, whenever an area became populated by Christians, we see a direct correlation with the privileges and treatments of women that expand in time when the surrounding culture largely didn't view women as being fully human. So I think we're always going to have abuses, but if there's one worldview that exists that gives agency to people and says that everybody has worth by nature of being just human, it's the Christian worldview. And that's where I think it's very different. So we can argue about why we think God should or shouldn't have revealed himself in his pronouns, but I think that's actually irrespective of the historical reality that we see within the impact of Christianity, particularly on the West, but around the world, and how it gives agency to the marginalized.
That's exactly right. There's so many good books on this. Rodney Stark's work is good. There's a book by a Lutheran scholar. I want to say his last name was Schweitzer, but I'm not sure about that. Oh, I think it's Schmidt. I think it might have been Alvin Schmidt. That's what I'm going with. And he wrote a book that originally was titled Under the Influence. I think he retitled the book later on, so I don't remember the renamed title. But I actually like the original title better, Under the Influence. But I guess probably people thought it was an alcoholic reference or something, so maybe that's why. Shout out to C for the super chat and all 7 of the super chats we've got today. I hope I didn't leave anybody out. And so that's the point he's making there. Let's see what else he says. This gets into ancient cultures. In the Billy Carson versus Wes Huff debate that was moderated by Mark Menard and originally was on Mark Menard's channel, we are adding our views, opinions, and commentary to this content, playing these clips and letting you see it for the first time.
I've read a lot of the literature that you're talking about, Billy, the Enuma, Elish, the Atrahasis, the Bhagavad Gita, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I've read some of them in their original languages because I've tried to be a good historian and go back into the primary sources. Or if I can't, engage with people like my friends who are Assyriologists, who are philologists, and try to...
Philologist is somebody who studies languages, by the way.
Not just go off of a translation, but the original. And I think I found largely the opposite of the conclusions that you have made, Billy. And I know that you are very passionate about what you talk about, and I respect that. I just think that the confidence might not actually be backed up by the reality of the evidence. So
a gentleman never accidentally insults anyone. Listen to what he said. What a great line. Let me go back on this one. Listen carefully to what Wes says here one more time. This is great.
The conclusions that you have made, Billy. And I know that you are very passionate about what you talk about, and I respect that. I just think that the confidence might not actually be backed up by the reality of the evidence. So when we're looking at something like the Sinai Bible, when we're looking at something like the Gospel of Barnabas, when we're looking at something like the Gospel of Jesus' wife, these are things that actually have provenance that we can verify. And ultimately, I think the answers to the questions of the legitimacy or the illegitimacy of those things point to not just a different conclusion, but actually the opposite conclusion, and that Christianity is true.
He's exactly right. Boom.
Well, now I'm glad you said that. So those 3 topics are a very small piece of my concept and idea of what really happened in the ancient past. So that's a very small fraction.
Oh, really? Don't you love these types of arguments? I know you've debunked everything I said so far, but that's only a small fraction of my overall argumentation. I'm glad you said that. Just catch this again. Understand what's happening here. Not since James White versus Rakaw from GOCC have we seen such a total deconstruction and meltdown in a debate as this within the urban apologetics context. Maybe there's a time or something I'm not aware. There has not been such a lopsided, out of order, destructive onslaught. This is Mondale versus Reagan level landslide.
These are things that actually have provenance that we can verify. And ultimately, I think the answers to the questions of the legitimacy or the illegitimacy of those things point to not just a different conclusion, but actually the opposite conclusion, and that Christianity is true.
Well, now I'm glad you said that. So those three topics are a very small piece of my concept and idea of what really happened in the ancient past. So that's a very small fraction. I mean, that's less than 0.1%. You talk about eyewitness accounts convinced you that Christianity is real.
He just said the things we've talked about so far are less than 0.1% of my. By the way, the rest of your stuff is just as bad, if not worse, first of all. Second of all, if it's less than 0.1%, then why is this the stuff you lead off the debate with and go around on all the podcast platforms with? Come on, bro. We ain't buying it.
There's been eyewitness accounts of every culture that I've visited around this entire planet, and their eyewitness accounts of what they experienced is 100,000% opposite of what's in the Bible.
Hold on there. You just said that the other accounts from ancient civilizations are 100,000% opposite of what's in the Bible, but you also told us that the Hebrew Bible copied word for word what's in other ancient civilizations' literature. Which one is it? Get your lies straight.
People have...
what do you mean? Can you give me an example?
The Dogon tribe, for example, in Mali, Africa.
Okay. You thought the debate was weird so far? You thought that it was out of bounds? You thought it was in left field? We are not done, folks. Shout out to Adela Armstrong for the super chat. Thank you, Vocab, for your obedience and sharing. Thank you. I appreciate the support because I may need to use this for a lawyer fund because I know that Billy likes to throw C&Ds at people. I'm only partially joking here, people. Listen to this.
They experienced a culture that they claim came to this planet from Sirius B. They have the evidence that they knew these beings were from Sirius B because they have the instruments that show the orbit of a trinary star system that we couldn't discover until the 1970s with our modern technology, okay? They understood not only the orbital pattern of Sirius A, B, and C, but even that B was a failed star, which you can't see it from Earth with the naked eye. They knew that it was a white dwarf. They even knew that they said that if you took a tablespoon of it, the entire tribe or 1,000 men couldn't lift the tablespoon. They understood mass and gravity as well. They were told the shape, the sizes, and the colors of all the planets in our solar system, which they recorded. And there's only one wisdom keeper, and that person can never be touched by a person. If they get touched by another person, they'd actually be killed. And then they eventually have a mentee that they break down that verbally handed down knowledge to. And that next person then takes over and becomes the wisdom keeper. And they've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. And science, modern science, has found all their information to be 1,000% accurate. Then you have the Hopi tribe. Of the Americas, indigenous tribes, Hopi tribe, Lakota tribe, also having engagements with these quote-unquote star brothers, even having an account of them being taken underground, which you don't see just only in America. I just came back from Turkey. You have the people from Turkey and Mesopotamia also being taken underground into a place called Derinkuyu.
By the way, what does this have to do with the things they were supposed to be discussing? He got slaughtered on Sinaiticus. He got vanquished on Gospel of Barnabas. He got beat up on Enuma Elish. He got discombobulated on God's masculinity. He got confounded on Christian ethics. So he retreated into his wheelhouse of ancient aliens and ancient civilizations. He went all pseudo-history channel on us, folks.
By these beings, by these people, a structure that's built 12 stories deep underground, that's made out of volcanic tuff, a very soft stone, and if you don't know what you're doing, it'll actually collapse. There's no evidence of any collapse, and it was thousands of years old. It was reused many times, so the mainstream story about what it was used for to hide from Romans is actually false.
What's up, Wes? How you doing, bro? Hanging in there?
This place is ancient. And in order to build it, you actually have to have foreknowledge of how to construct this type of an underground civilization that can hold 20 to 30,000 people, spaces for livestock, places for worship, with no sign of collapse. And you have to have hundreds of ventilation shafts. And I've been down there. Those ventilation shafts cut through solid rock all the way down to the core. And there's even more. It links to other underground cities that are miles and miles away. As you get to the very base of this area, you can cut through and go to another location. But again, these people were taken under. Also, then you have the ancient Egyptians.
This was all in the debate. Now I understood what Wes meant when Wes said, it's not like Billy didn't talk, because he did. Now notice, in the actual stuff Billy brought up, the responses were, well, if you say it's a forgery, I'll go with that. Or I disagree. Or I misspoke. Or, but now he's talking a lot. Yo. His position just collapsed. Great was the fall thereof. Indeed, Lewis.
Similar story. Major catastrophe comes. These people come and take them underground. Then you have the information in the Egyptian book of Going Forth by Day. More accounts by people, our ancestors, that have accounts that do not match up with the biblical text. And so all of a sudden we're saying that all these cultures, the Aboriginal people, I can go into them as well. I've gone for walkabouts in Outback, in the Outback, and the Aboriginal elders, same thing. They were seated here by Pleiadians. This is their verbal handed on history for thousands of years. And I can go around the world and I can come up with all this information from all these eyewitness accounts from people that should be respected, dignified, and shouldn't be scoffed. And that we're now saying that all this information that they put forward, all their verbal handed on history, all their written history, that's got to go to the side, because this one text is 1,000% accurate.
I've been all around the world and I can't find aliens. I don't know. Been all around the world and I couldn't find ancient aliens. All right. Now, this is a great part where my man says, okay, if you're coming up with all this stuff, let us know what your historical method is, because I need to understand what's happened on Crocodile Dundee. Went on a walkabout. Yeah. It's like, well, how do you determine which is which? And Wes asks him that exact question, which is a great question. Oh, Lord help us.
Most of that is oral history, correct?
Oh, it's all oral history, even the Bible.
Okay, so when we're engaging with oral history, what methodologies are you using to confirm that the orality is accurate?
Oh, man. Well, first...
Hey, watch his face. Oh, man. It's so funny. Leaf of a Vine Eternal says, I would pay top dollar to see Billy Carson debate Sakari. Error versus error. Let's go back a little bit. Watch this question, because he's going to say, how do you determine? Basically, what he's saying is, how do you determine which of these stories, these accounts are true, and which ones
people,
aren't?
Places for livestock, places for worship, with no sign of collapse. And you have to have hundreds of counts by people, our ancestors, and shouldn't be scoffed.
Accurate.
Oh, man.
Hold on, right there. My bad. I've skipped around a little bit. That's my bad. Hold on. Let me get that again. Okay.
What methodologies are you using to confirm that the orality is accurate?
Oh, man. Well, first and foremost, some of these texts cultures have written down information in caves. You've got cave paintings. The Dogon tribe actually have not only written down.
Sure. No, caves, I don't disagree with that. The question.
He didn't understand the question, by the way. He's asking about historical method. Very important.
Is one of historic. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. The question is one of methodological analysis. So you have to have a method by which you can find either that something is falsifiable or that there are avenues by which you can show internal and external accuracy of credibility. So this is what we do with documents. This is what we do with the ancient Gospels. This is what I do. I've worked on Xenophon and Plutarch. And we look at
Those are ancient historians, by the way.
internal evidences and the external multivalent corroboration to try to figure out, okay, yes, we have all these stories. Great. I don't deny that. But as a historian, as someone who's trying to figure out what is accurate, how do you know if I use the term verisimilitude, do you know what that term means?
No, but I can tell you this. Tell me how the Dogon tribe saw Sirius B, knew the orbit of Sirius B, a trinary star system, accurately, and can show you the orbit with a special tool that they made that was given to them by these people. How do they know the shapes, the sizes, the colors, and the orbital pattern of all these planets in our solar system and other star alignments that they would use to have something called the Ziggy and planet and their own harvesting and planting and so forth and so on?
Yo, do you know what verisimilitude is? No, but I can tell you this. Yo, this is like how politicians be answering questions they don't know the answer to, or they don't want to answer. The idea of verisimilitude is that something gives the quality of being real or legitimate. So he's using it in a more technical sense. Like, how do you know if something bears the marks of accuracy? That's what he's getting into with the idea of verisimilitude. But watch this again. It's so funny. My goodness. It's so sad, though, too. Do you know what verisimilitude is? No, but let me tell you a story. Here's a little story about a man named...
Have all these stories. Great. I don't deny that. But as a historian, as someone who's trying to figure out what is accurate, how do you know if I use the term verisimilitude, do you know what that term means?
No, but I can tell you this. Tell me how the Dogon tribe saw Sirius B, knew the orbit of Sirius B, a trinary star system, accurately, and can show you the orbit with a special tool that they made that was given to them by these people. How do they know the shapes, the sizes, the colors, and the orbital pattern of all these planets in our solar system and other star alignments that they would use to have something called the Ziggy and planet and their own harvesting and planting and so forth and so on? That's not enough evidence, though, that there's something.
Well, I'm not aware of that particular case. And even, I would grant that, the ancient people are far more technological advanced than we give themselves credit for. Just because they're ancient doesn't mean they're stupid. I am well aware, as someone who has done both investigation of the past and done archaeological analysis, that is a reality.
Wow. We are not finished, folks. The plan, by God's grace, is to pick this up tomorrow. And hopefully this video is still up. We will know tomorrow. But there are 25 minutes still worth of clips. I thank you to everyone who joined tonight. And I think we all now know why Billy Carson did not want this debate with Wes Huff to come out. But we got to praise God, because it's not just about Billy just sort of messing up. The point is that truth will prevail. And the point is that we have good evidence for the scripture, despite what people like Billy Carson say. When their feet are held to the fire, we see that the flames shred their theories into the ether. And that's exactly what happened. And because Billy claims to be an expert in so many different areas, he speaks on areas that he clearly does not know what he's talking about and doesn't have expertise in. This is exposed in full view, 3D, 4D, color right there for the world to see, except the world can't see it because he's been doing his best to scrub the internet. But it's not going to happen by God's grace. I'm going to be part of this. I encourage everybody and their mama to do reviews of this. Grab all the clips you can and review this. Make shorts. Let's not let this go away. In Jesus' name. And now I'm going to let Wes himself close out telling you the story of how this all went down. Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Isn't clickbait. I actually debated Billy Carson. Let me tell you about it. So last week I got a message in my DMs from a podcast host saying he knew Billy and that Billy was going to be in his studio the next day, and asked if I'd be willing to come in and discuss some of the things that Billy has said very publicly about Christianity. Now, this particular podcaster lives in Florida. I live in Toronto, Canada. So with less than 24 hours notice, I just wasn't able to be in studio. But I did say that I'd be more than willing to hop on a virtual call and interact with Billy that way. And for the record, I also made it clear that I didn't want this to to come across as some sort of trap or gotcha. If Billy was willing to interact with me knowing who I was, that's great, but I said specifically that I did not want this to be some sort of ambush. I was assured that this was not the case. I was being invited, Billy was being notified of that, and that we would have a respectful and good faith discussion. And as far as I'm concerned, that is in fact what took place. Now, we only talked for a little over an hour, and if I'm honest, I really wished we would have talked about more. Billy had to leave after that hour. He was upfront about that at the beginning, so he wasn't running away or anything. He actually had to go, and he had prefaced the conversation with that. There were about a dozen things that Billy has said very confidently on very public platforms about Christianity that are just simply false. And I wanted to push him on those things. Credible scrutiny only helps to refine and sharpen the truth. I want to be shown where I'm wrong and where I say things that are incorrect. And I think as long as it's done with proper intentions in the right way, doing that with others shows respect for them too. In my personal opinion, the conversation did not go well for Billy though. He really didn't have much of a rebuttal to what I said. And that didn't mean he didn't talk a lot. He did. But when I asked him about his sources, about the credibility, he just kind of shrugged his shoulders. When he said, as he's done on some of the world's biggest online platforms, that the Sinai Bible denies the crucifixion, and I pulled a literal facsimile of the Sinai Bible off my bookshelf and asked him why he would say that when I can clearly open up the Greek text in the Gospels in the Sinai Bible and find the crucifixion. His response was that he misspoke, that he really meant to say the Gospel of Barnabas or the Gospel of Jesus' wife. When I walked through why the Gospel of Barnabas and the Gospel of Jesus' wife are known forgeries from the modern era, he didn't have any type of answer. Now, in the wake of the interview, Billy Carson has asked that the recording not be released. And in all honesty, I do get why. This is Billy's bread and butter. His career as a content creator and public figure, and his credibility as an online educator are influenced by the way he comes across and the integrity and reliability of the topics he discusses. If that is put under careful examination and its truthfulness is undermined, that has consequences for Billy. Now, I don't know if that recording will ever see the light of day. I hope it does, but I don't know. But let me say that I trust the podcast host whose channel this took place on, and it is entirely his decision to post or not to post the content. I respect that, even if I do in fact want the interaction to be public. It's his podcast on his channel, and he has the right to agree with Billy's request. The fact that Billy doesn't want it to be posted clearly communicates to me that he also didn't think it went very well. Let me just finish by saying this. Billy says a lot of out there stuff, but among it all are just patently false things about the Bible and Christianity. I've made a bunch of content addressing these things and what Billy has said, and in it all, I hope what those interactions and responses reflect is not a personal attack on Billy. I can separate Billy Carson from the ideas he espouses, and I think that should always be our tactic. I debated Billy Carson. As far as I'm aware, I'm the only person who ever has. Maybe I'm the only person who ever will. And whether that gets posted or not, I think the fact that Billy doesn't want it to be posted also tells you how well Billy